Hey, what's up? It's Rashad. Hanging with the Joneses, Moon Knight, episode number 5. And we're at the penultimate episode of the series. Kind of explain a lot of things that are going on. And all spoilers, of course. You got to talk about the thing to actually talk about the thing. The theme of this episode is something that author Harrow says towards the end, and there can be no progress without understanding. And that is essentially what this episode is trying to do. Is trying to tell us what's going on in this whole series, and essentially it's a first for Marvel. I mean that I remember, and it's a bad mom. Usually we have bad dads, but now we have a bad mom. So the Mark Spector of it all is that when he was a kid, and essentially this is like the origin story of this whole of Moon Knight, Mark Spector. Supposedly, him and his brother go play in this cave of some sort, which is crazy to go play in as a kid. And the cave fills with water. His brother ends up dying, and his mom, and in her grief and mourning, blames Mark for his brother's death, and that is the struggle that Mark deals with as a child. And his mom is abusive. Mom becomes like a alcoholic, and now Mark, in order to deal with that, disassociates himself and creates this Mark. I'm sorry, and Mark creates Stephen Grant. Stephen Grant again is the fictitious character that we see from the film from the last episode. Mark is really trying to make sure that he's protecting himself essentially against his mom. And the whole reason why the identity is starting to merge is because his mother ends up passing away 2 months prior to the start of the show. That's the kind of like, that's the crazy part because his disorder, as a sense, was born out of a way of dealing and coping with pain. So that is essentially the crux of this episode is what we believe to be Dr. Harrow trying to lead him down this path to get him to understand his past. And the conflict is between Mark and Steve, and they're going back and forth trying, and Steve is trying to see what happened, and Mark is trying to still hide himself from not being able to see the old pain. That's the whole point of this. He's not trying to relive his past. And in this episode, we get to see those past events, those things that make Steven and what make Mark Mark. Another theme to this episode is you have to die to self in order to live. Tirawat, I think that's how you pronounce that. It's kind of hard. The hippopotamus, and of course the scales in him are not balanced. We saw that back in like the first episode or so, and when Arthur tries to scale the weigh the scales of balance against him, and it was just shaking the whole time on his forearm. The same thing is happening because they're trying to go to Field of Reeds, basically trying to go to the afterlife and live, live happily ever after of sorts. The scales won't balance. It's not until Steve gets thrown overboard, since the scales won't balance, the dead in the field and the sand have to basically take them, and they live in the sand forever. So after Steve ends up falling overboard on this boat that is essentially on sand, which is like it was a cool how it's really cool how they did that and the visual of that. So kudos to the special effects for again a TV show. Steven goes overboard and he tries to reach for him, and then he turns into sand. After that happens, the scales actually balance. On Terra, I was like, oh, so the scales balance. And as soon as that happens, boom, he goes to the field of reeds. He gets to have rest. So now this episode is essentially how can Mark reconcile his past without trying to disassociate himself from it. And I think they did they did a really, I mean, they did a pretty decent job of handling this whole DID, because this could have been a really, this could have been really mishandled and been very, very, I mean, to be honest, very offensive. Also, there is like a sense that could be triggering to some people, but there's a sense of like child abuse from a parental figure. If you do deal with that, then that may trigger some sort of memory in your mind. And the thing that I think the show's trying to get across, as well as Steve was trying to get across to Mark, is like, it's not your fault. Like, it's not your fault your brother died. It's not your fault your mom ended up the way they did. Like, it's really not your fault. Like, you were just a kid. A lot of children hold on to this fact that, like, yo, it's my fault that my parents got divorced, or it's my fault that, this tragic event happened. Like, yo, you were like 7. Like, how is it your fault? So I think they did a really good job of handling that very difficult aspects for a child's mind to kind of easily place blame, and then that adult to still be remaining with that childlike mindset that, like, yo, oh, this is my fault, and I have to take responsibility for something that happened maybe 20, 30 years ago. So that part of it was like, I really respected Marvel for even coming at it from this angle, having the audacity to actually try it and do a pretty decent job of it. But yeah, that's really all I have for this episode. There are a lot of other smaller things that happen. A lot of funny parts in this. Steve calls author Ned Flanders, which was funny. So there's a lot of, they still injected, their Patton Marvel humor into it, but this is actually more of a very sobering, serious episode. But yeah, episode 6 next Wednesday, next Thursday, Multiverse of Madness. We will be having our review, and that will be posting sometime late Thursday evening. So make sure you are subscribed, locked in, so we can have a conversation next week. All right. Until next time.